Welcome into a special daily puck drop here on Friday. No live show today because we are rooting on the Ballard gymnastics team, but we're taking care of you for a special Friday show recap of the best stuff we've done this week. It's hard to find the best stuff. I know the joke. I beat you to it. We've got Rob Staton of SeahawksDraftBlog.com giving you the very latest thoughts on the upcoming NFL draft from a Seahawks perspective. Ryan Divish, Mr. Sunshine, is from Peoria with the birds in the background, giving you the latest from Mariners spring training camp and some news and notes on the RSN and streaming side for the Mariners if you are into that. Tim Booth of the Seattle Times was at the NBA All-Star Game. He gives us an update on the very latest on NBA expansion in Seattle. Are the goalposts being moved further away from your Seattle city, our city, getting an NBA team back? And finally, Dane Brugler of The Athletic, author of The Beast. He covers the NFL draft better than anyone in the business, and he's got the Bible of The Beast is unbelievable. Episode 1 of a 7-part series that we're doing with Dane leading up to the NFL draft, and he will wrap up Friday's Daily Punt Drop. We'll be back with a live show coming up on Monday. Everybody enjoy the weekend. As always, promise to be better.
And I've not been the biggest Jackson Dart fan. And after writing this article, I just came away thinking, I've probably been underestimating this guy. Like, I've been trying to work out why the media, and when I say the media, I mean the people who are in the know. Like, Todd McShay is very connected. He knows a lot of people. He's very close to some big names in the NFL. And when he suddenly starts saying, after a pretty unspectacular Senior Bowl from Jackson Dart, that he could be the second quarterback taken, then you kind of listen to all of the different people, and we all know who they are, who have sources in the NFL, and they're all kind of saying the same thing. You wonder, where is this coming from? Is it an active agent? Is it just that we've all, I don't know, maybe we're just not seeing what the league is seeing, whatever it is. And then I wrote this article, and so here's the things that Jackson Dart comes out on top on in this class. Big time throws against turnover-worthy plays. Big time throws off play action, where he is miles ahead of everyone else in this draft and the last draft class as well, which was a good draft class for quarterbacks. He doesn't create pressure against himself. He doesn't create his own sacks. His QBR, which over the last few years has correlated with being a high draft pick, is the same range as Michael Penix Jr. There's good data on his running ability. For example, he had 28 runs of more than 10 yards. That's only 2 fewer than Jalen Milroe, and everybody thinks he's just basically a running quarterback. So he just comes across well in every one of these data points. And it's making me think, actually, maybe I've underrated him. Maybe I've underestimated him. Maybe there's something to this chatter. Maybe he's going to go a lot earlier than I thought.
But you're not the only one that's in this camp. I mean, you look at all these mock drafts, and when people discuss the quarterbacks, he's not being mentioned as one of the first guys off the board. I mean, it's always Cam, it's Cam Ward, it's Shedeur Sanders, but Jackson Dart. I mean, he's gaining more attention, Rob. But why though? Because you look at him and you go, well, he kind of looks like the guy getting off the bus, right? When he gets off the bus as a quarterback, you're like, oh, yeah, that's the quarterback. And then the name, it's perfect. It's a perfect quarterback name, by the way. But what is it about maybe the actual play? Right, come on, Jackson Dart. Can there be a better name? Find me a better name than that for playing quarterback.
Yeah.
But what is it about his play? Is it the scheme? What was it that Kiffin ran? I mean, why did it take people so long to warm up to him, you think?
I don't know. I mean, when I watched him, there were a couple of games, and maybe, again, look, you do this when you watch players, you kind of form your opinions early on, and this is why you have to go back and reflect. But
you can't get off those opinions initially, right?
You do, but you don't want to overcorrect, and that's something I'm going to have to be very careful not to do off the back of writing this 5,000-word article, is not overcorrect too much. But there was the Kentucky game, for example, where he didn't get the job done, that he dropped his eyes too quickly, was trying to take off and run thinking he's Lamar Jackson, and he was not converting first downs, and it was a problem. Then there's the Florida game late on where he had a chance to 2 game-winning drives, opportunities, didn't score on either of them through interceptions on both drives. He had a third overturned, and that cost them a chance to the playoffs. And you think of things like that, and you form bad opinions of Jackson Dart. But then, as I'm writing this article, I'm thinking, okay, but what did Jaden Daniels do last year? He lost 3 games, with LSU. They didn't make the playoffs. He lost to Jackson Dart and Ole Miss last season. So, Bo Nix couldn't beat Washington. They couldn't get over the line against the Huskies. So some of these quarterbacks who then went into the NFL didn't end their college careers in the most perfect way, like Jackson Dart. And then there was the other thing that I found really interesting is I'm not a big analytics guy. Like I'm not completely against analytics.
This is why this whole series was a big step for you, sir. And congratulations for recognizing your weakness.
Yeah, I'm not a big analytics guy. I prefer to sort of watch football and form opinions that way. But I'm not a Luddite. I don't not pay attention to this kind of stuff. But the QBR thing, and it's like a formula. There's a very long article, probably one of mine on ESPN explaining what it is. But it is something that teams have taken interest in. And I had a look, Puck, that if you are a quarterback in college football who has been drafted in the last, I think, 4 drafts, if you've scored an 80 or higher on QBR, I wrote them all down. 12 first-round picks, 3 day 2 picks, and an early 4th round pick. So if you're scoring an 80 or higher, you are going to be a high draft pick. That's what the data says over the last 4 drafts. You were going to be a high draft pick. And then I look at the 2025 quarterback class, and you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks who have a plus 80 for QBR. I think we're going to see quarterbacks go a bit earlier than people think. I think we are going to have a middle class. I think by the end of the 4th round, we're going to have seen a decent chunk of quarterbacks taken in this draft.
Who are those 6, you think?
So the 6 that got a plus 80, Cam Ward led the way. So that's probably another validating data point for him being the first quarterback taken. Dylan Gabriel scored very highly. He's short. He struggles to throw to his right side because he's left-handed. I don't think he's going to go that early, but maybe he goes in the 4th round. Curtis Rourke, I think he would have gone in the 4th round, but for the ACL injury. So he might last a bit. Then it's Jackson Dart. Then it's Will Howard. Then it's Jalen Milroe. So they're the players. And then just on the outside of that 80 cutoff, you have Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Riley Leonard, Kyle McCord. So you actually have the quarterbacks in this draft. They score very highly in this spot. And that's why I think I'm not saying they're going to go in the 1st round. I think there's a decent chance based on this study that we're going to see Ward go first. Then it'll be a battle between Sanders and Dart for 2nd. And then we may have to wait till round 2 or round 3. But I think there will be a run at some point on day 2 where the quarterbacks come off the board.
So did you come away after doing all of this? Did you come away feeling, sounds like you came away feeling better about this class?
I came away thinking this is not a blue chip quarterback class. You do not have top stars. You do not have the Jaden Daniels types, the Drake Mays, people like that. But you have a deeper class than I thought. There is a decent middle class here. And I think there are players in this class who have the opportunity, and this is not recency bias because of what happened a week last Sunday, have got a chance if they get in the right place with the right supporting cast, with the right coach, they could have a Jalen Hurts type career.
Which is solid. more than solid, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it feels like you can find someone later that this would be the year of the draft where the Seahawks do select someone.
I think they're going to take one. I think they're going to draft a quarterback in this draft.
When you wrote this article, did it find you, at least reading it, that maybe you're like, I still like Quinn Ewers, but maybe now with this research, maybe I'm not as warm on him anymore?
There's a lot of difficult data for Quinn Ewers. It's not a great read. If you are, and there are people out there who have, they do like Quinn Ewers,
sure.
And when they read this, they're going to think, "Oh my word!" Like there is some bad data. I think the one, and I would encourage people to read it because we probably would spend the rest of the show talking about Quinn Ewers' bad data if we were going to go through everything. But there is one slight thing, and the injuries are both an excuse for Quinn Ewers and also a reason for real concern. So on the one hand, I think that the injury issue is something that, can he stay healthy? I don't know if he can. I'm not confident about that.
Hey, remind me of the injuries again.
He had an abdomen injury and then he had an ankle injury.
Where's your abdomen?
It's kind of sort of here, midriff sort of area.
I'm just going to write that down.
He had a very It was. Here's the thing, Puck, and people have made a good point here. This is not as if he gets hammered in the pocket and has had bad injuries. This really has been. He's thrown a ball and kind of pulled something, and then as he's gone down, he's kind of twisted his own ankle, and all of this stuff. I find that really, really, really strange.
Okay,
but the thing is before the injuries, his QBR was elite. It was 85.4. Then he came back too soon because they got Oklahoma and they had got Georgia, and he wanted to come back and play in those games. He came back way too soon. He had an absolute nightmare against Georgia because he wasn't healthy. At the end of the season, in the final 5 games of the year, his QBR was really good again. So the worst bit of his season, where all of the turnover-worthy plays and the bad stuff happened, was when he wasn't healthy. So on the one hand, like I say, that's an excuse for the bad play. There was some good play, but the problem is anybody who drafts him has got to believe we can keep this guy healthy, and that's really, really hard to do, to say that pre-draft anyway.
Yeah, it's and here's the thing though, when you go back, and this is I think what I love about how you do things, and is that you incorporate a little bit of the analytics and the numbers there, and still use your eyes to evaluate it. And I think that's going to be the thing with a guy like Quinn Ewers. Maybe the stats there don't back it up what he can be, but then the eyes could maybe provide more reasons why you would select him. I think it's going to be a fascinating class. I really is. I can't figure out the quarterback stuff. When I think someone's going to be a hit, they're a dud. When I think someone's going to be a dud, they're a hit. I have no idea. Like, I don't think Cam Ward's going to be any good. And Cam Ward's going to get picked number 1. He's going to be a star. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be the best of them. Shedeur Sanders is going to be out of the league in 2 years playing in the XFL. I mean, I don't know. I don't know any of this stuff. I didn't think Jaden Daniels is going to be good, and he's a stud. So it is, my old good friend, still a good friend, ex-coworker Hugh Millen used to say this all the time. He's like, you couldn't pay enough money to someone to evaluate this position, because it's simply the hardest thing to do in sports. Nothing compares to the evaluation of a quarterback and drafting of a quarterback. Nothing is a bigger crapshoot than that. He's right.
He's
so
absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. And over the years, you kind of do it. Ever since they traded Russell Wilson, I've made it sort of a mission to watch every game that every notable quarterback plays, to have the best amount of information to hand to sort of be able to talk about them. And it's so hard. Like you can focus on traits. You can focus on, what people say about them. Like there's one quarterback, like people, talk about Will Levis. I had the opportunity to interview Will Levis and speak to people at Kentucky about Will Levis, and then all of them spoke with just the most highest glowing praise. Unbelievable athlete. Did some good stuff at times for Kentucky, had all of the tools, but he's not worked out because he can't stop making boneheaded mistakes, and he's quite robotic and stiff despite the athleticism, and he's bulked up too much. And that's such a hard thing. The difference between him and, say, Justin Herbert isn't that much in terms of the physical tools and the character, but the performance on the field is very, very different. So it's very, very difficult to sort of judge who is good. Nobody could have said watching Wyoming that Josh Allen was going to be Josh Allen.
Exactly.
If everyone knew Lamar Jackson was going to be MVP level player, he never lasts to the end of the first round. Yeah. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's fun. It's fun to talk about it and try and work it out.
It is. It's extremely fun. I love it. I mean, I there's at times that I enjoy the draft sometimes more than football. I love the NFL draft. I love all drafts. I think we talked about this. I talked about this yesterday. I'm a huge NBA fan, and I want the Sonics to come back and all that. But I loved. Now, not so much anymore because the league has changed, or the college basketball has changed so much and all that. I still love the NBA draft. Loved it. You'd watch these guys for 3 or 4 years play college ball, and then the lottery, and you'd watch, and like, I would just sit there and watch it all the time. The NFL is the only one that's really like that anymore. Major League Baseball is not a thing. You don't know any of the players because no one watches college baseball for the most part. And then they drafted a bunch of high school kids. It's the same thing with like hockey. I don't think hockey's that enjoyable to watch the draft. You don't know any of these guys, and a lot of them are coming over from Europe and all that. The NFL, though, you know all the players for the most part because they've stayed in school for 3+ years and generally play for some of the bigger programs, and you'll watch it every Saturday. So it's you feel like you know all these guys, and it's fun. It's a fun day. It's a fun 3 days. So, and the quarterback is always the sexiest position. You did the same stuff you did on the quarterbacks. You did on the D line and offensive line. Dealer's choice. You wrote it. Which way do you want to go now?
Well, I'll go with offensive line just because I think that's the one that most people. I mean, look, the quarterbacks are interested to talk about, but I think most people are very interested in the offensive line and how the Seahawks repair that. And I think so doing this, I did it for free agents and I did it also for the draftable players.
Right.
And I think what is pretty clear is that there's one guy and we talked about him in the past, who stands head and shoulders above all of the others in terms of you have got, if you were going to really fix this offensive line, I think they've got to go after Drew Dalman. He has played the most snaps at a high level in the zone blocking scheme. He is a legit top 5 center in the league. He has all of the physical tools and the testing at the combine that you need for a top center. And he has gone on to have a great time in Atlanta, and they've got to try and get him. The problem is that there's probably about 25 teams who are going to want to try and sign this guy. And it's how do you convince him to come to Seattle, especially if the Niners are interested in him, knowing he was born in California and he went to Stanford. That these are the kind of challenges. And if you don't get Drew Dalman, Puck, there isn't a lot of, short of going and getting Trey Smith, it's kind of those two guys. Once they're not available anymore, you run a very dangerous possibility here of throwing bad money at average players.
Hey, go back to Cal for a second. Why has there not been more talks about a contract with him? Why is it so quiet on that front, especially after he switched agents?
I don't know. I asked him about it, and Kyle just says, like, I'm open to listen, just come with a real offer. I mean, I don't know. Like, on some level, the pessimist, and you talk to some guys around baseball, it's like, oh, they're just going to mule him and run him into the ground over the next few years and then say, and then trade him when he doesn't want to resign. And, others are thinking, well, they're not in a position financially to make that investment. And then the people like you who wear the armadillo helmets will say the reason they haven't done this is because they already have Julio, and this ownership group eventually wants to sell within the next 3 years, and that's why they haven't made another major investment.
I'm dumb. I don't get the armadillo reference.
So it's like, I don't remember. I think it was on the Dukes of Hazzard remake. This guy wore an armadillo helmet. I made out of a shell because he thought the FBI was stealing his brainwaves. So it's like the tinfoil hat.
Okay. You think my suggestion that they could contemplate selling the team is like
I mean, like, given
I'm
what,
just wondering
given,
they don't spend any. I'm just saying that the signs of a team that wants to sell, they are showing signs of it.
A little bit, yeah. But given what the going rate for a franchise is and what you would make, every team should consider selling it.
100%.
I mean,
they'd be fools not to.
But no, I don't think so. I think because they're not operating. I mean, the only structural issue that is problem for the ownership group is the RSN situation, and that'll get figured out in the next few years, and I can talk about that too. But sure. That'll get figured out in the next few years or so. Some stability will come to it. But yeah, I mean, you look at the lease with the city, the upkeep of T-Mobile, no park has aged better than T-Mobile. Maybe Coors, they're about the same. They've aged well. It's not like the Diamondbacks who are looking to redo their whole stadium here. You look at they invested money back in the day in the Dominican Summer League in their academy in the Dominican. That's state of the art. They just, were able to, they're just unable to, do some renovations down here at the spring training complex for very minimal money. They didn't go the expensive route but they put in a lot of new stuff. So it looks not like a junior college back there. They've done a lot of stuff to make this more attractive for players and to make it more sustainable for success. So it's well, and then you're making money even without investing. Like they don't have to reinvest their money back into reinvest outside money or their own money back into the organization because it makes enough money to sustain itself.
Right.
And I think so when you're operating on that level, you're like, okay, well, why would we sell if we're always going to be sustainable? And and you say what you want about Jerry and the 54% mindset, but what Scott Hunter has done in the draft and what they've done from a developmental aspect, they're always, I don't think we'll see the year where they lose 100 games again for quite a while because they put enough pieces together, it's self-sustaining in a lot of ways. You watch these prospects that are coming up and you watch, I'm watching, Logan Evans throw and it's 97 and he throws 7 different pitches and you're like, well, he'll just bump right in. You watch Laz Montez and Colt Emerson and all these guys work around there and they look like grown-ass men at 18 years, 19 years old. You're like, okay, there are pieces coming. This isn't like when, in 07 where they hitched their wagon to Uni Betancourt and Jose Lopez and didn't have anybody in the minors to challenge them. No, they have real guys. Colt Emerson will replace JP Crawford in 2 years is my guess. Yeah. JP Crawford's contract will be up and Colt will take over and the Mariners will be happy. I mean, Cole Young, who looks like a kid out of Super Troopers right now with his mustache, will be the starting second baseman next year. I have no doubt in my mind, unless they trade him. Those two guys will be, in their lineup next year or in their lineup at some point next year. Colt probably won't debut till later in the year, but, Cole Young is fully expected to be the starting second baseman by next season, and he could be by the end of this season if he plays well in spring training.
You brought up the TV stuff, the RSN, the streaming stuff. I talked about this last week that I'm pretty confident that they're going to have a streaming aspect, to this season, whether it's ready for opening day or not. What are you hearing? I know Kevin Martinez was on with Softy. I think he hinted at the same thing. What are you hearing on the streaming front? What are you hearing on the just the future of what their broadcasting is going to be for this season and then beyond? So
they are trying to get what they call direct-to-fan streaming or direct streaming without a third party, like Root, going through Root. I think even if they were to get a streaming product this year, it's still got the Root label on it. You see the Root thing. It might even be an app that you have to go through Root, but you would pay a fee. The problem is the distribution contracts with Comcast, Spectrum, Fubo. Those all have riders in those contracts that the Mariners cannot do direct-to-fan streaming. They have to go through them in some way. They have to be available to them. So that's what they're trying to work through. So they're negotiating with these cable distributors about, hey, look, we want to do this, and you're putting us on these higher tier anyway, so we should be able to do this. We want to renegotiate the contracts. We want to figure out a way to do this. And that's what Martinez has been working on. It's been, from everything I've heard, it's been a focus for them going in, even starting last year, is how do they get direct-to-consumer or direct-to-fan streaming without having to go through an Xfinity app or the Fubo app or whatever. And those contracts are the sticking point. And when those contracts are up and all that other stuff is going to be an issue. I think the Mariners also know, though, that with their fan base and given the age of it, because Mabel and Yakima loves the Mariners, they are willing to pay the cable fees just to have the Mariners. And so, you have to assess that, too. They can't go to full platform streaming, They have to find a way. So until they can reach agreements with these cable rights or these cable companies, these distribution contracts, I don't think you're going to see that. But moving towards MLB for the production side, which, while probably might cheapen it a little bit and has cost some people some jobs, that is another step towards making that possibility. The reason the teams like the Cardinals and Twins and stuff is they don't have RSN contracts per se, and then when Diamond Sports had to rework all their contracts and stuff like that with these teams, they were able to negotiate a straight to rights deal. Whether even if I think the Mariners could work out a deal where they went through Amazon as a third party, they would do it. They can't do it right now and stand alone because of Comcast, because of Spectrum. I don't know what else.
What do you have an idea? But the idea behind this would be for people that do not have cable, do not have Fubo or YouTube TV. They would simply just purchase a streaming app through that would be provided by Root so they could watch the games. Is there any talk or number being floated out how much it would cost?
No, but my guess would be, 150 or something. I think the Twins is 100.
I think most of those like the Guardians, Twins, Diamondbacks, Cardinals, about $99, $100.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing. Even if they were, like, say they were able to negotiate a fee where you kick back money to Comcast and these other rights distributors, then, or like you can get one of them to say, if they can get Comcast to just put Root on their what is it, the X Anywhere app,
Sure.
So that they could get that. If they could find that fee, then they would do that. I mean, like, would Comcast accept a fee where you just pay to go through their app where they still have their commercials loading but you just pay the rights fee for Root? I don't know if they do that. That's what they're running into. And that's the biggest thing is, like, you have these other people that are still trying to make money off the Mariners broadcast, and they don't, the previous contracts have all been negotiated that any broadcast of Mariners has to have some kickback rights to them, and that's the holding point.
The Mitch Garver, what is Mitch Garver? It's a weird transition going from TV to Mitch Garver, but yeah, I wanted to come back to Mitch Garver because you had mentioned him. He'd been honest at the end of last season, just about the struggles he went through, physically, but more mentally. What does he look like so far in camp?
I think he's in a pretty good space. I mean, he's, like last year, he was very open and gregarious and talkative early, and then when he struggled, he's kind of quiet. We didn't see him as much. He's been kind of that same guy this year, fresh start, fresh outlook. I think also just kind of like the idea that, like, hey, I'm not the guy that has to come in and help this offense and fix everything and be this middle of the order presence. Just come in and play and perform, and we'll figure out how you're going to use you. I think is pretty good for him. Like right now he's the backup catcher, and Dan Wilson has mentioned that they'll use two catchers. They'll DH Cal some, and they may DH Mitch some. And like DePoto said the same thing. It's basically whoever is producing, whoever they think is producing at the time is going to get that DH spot when Cal is catching. So whether it's Mitch Garver, Mitch Haniger, or if they want to put Solano and Rayleigh in the lineup at the same time, they're going to do it. Like, to me, if the one thing I'm looking at this, Rayleigh needs plate appearances. I mean, and they need to find ways to get him on the field because he's one of their better power hitters and he can do damage. So they got to find ways to do it. And whether that's at times getting him in right field or left field, doing that, just he shouldn't sit for many days, because even if it's like a lefty that isn't overpowering, Luke's numbers against lefties aren't pretty, but they're more effective than a lot of other guys. And like even DePoto said that it isn't going to be just a straight platoon. There'll be days when Luke's in there at first base against lefties. One thing is too, though, I know Luke doesn't believe first base is his best position. He's much more comfortable in the outfield.
Okay.
But he's getting better there, So I think that's kind of the weird thing that they're at, is how do they do DH, how do they do second base, and how that affects everything.
He's athletic enough though, Div, that he's got a good chance to be, I think, a pretty good first baseman.
Oh yeah, and him and Perry Hill spent quite a bit of time together, and so.
How's Perry's gut looking?
It's special. Yeah, I mean, like Perry was, and I got a story on Perry doing yoga this offseason because.
Oh, I got it. Is that you wrote a story on it?
I haven't yet, but he told Tyler Locklear that he needed to do yoga in the offseason because Locklear's big, fullback linebacker looking guy, who's too stiff,
more flexible.
So he wanted to be more flexible, and so, but he said, I'll do it if you do it, and we'll report back, because Perry said, I would never make my guys do a conditioning that I won't do myself. And so him and Locklear both did yoga once or twice a week and reported. And so, like Locklear is telling me how much better he feels. But I'm just trying to envision Perry, in a room of like 40 women. He didn't do the Bikram hot yoga. I think that's, but like he's a character, you know, and he
Downward
has
dog.
a,
Can you see him in Downward Dog and
oh man,
Pigeon Pose?
He has this great line, you know how he yells and stuff, you know, stop and stuff. But like when he's working with the young kids, like he was yelling at Arroyo and Colt Emerson, see what happens when you actually listen. And I was like, I feel like you can use that for your team. Like, see what happens when when you're talking to your son and he doesn't like lift his back foot up on a swing and, you know, pimp a homer or whatever. Like, see what happens when you listen. That's
You know what this
need to
idiot did yesterday? I just idiot. We brought in an older kid who was with us last year, but he can't play Little League. So we brought him in because he throws really hard.
Yeah.
And so he's a really good pitcher. I said, I want you to pitch to them tonight, just, you know, so they can see it. And because he's not, and pitch from 46.
Yeah.
You're pitching from 50 now, but, you know, it's going to come in faster. They'll never see anyone as hard as you this year. So we're just doing BP. So he's striking everybody out for the most part. I think one kid got a hit. So my kid comes up, gets him on 2 strikes. What does he do? Because they're like best friends. He wants bragging rights. He drops down a bunt.
Of course he does.
And I'm like, he's like, it's a hit. It's broke up his no-hitter. I said, do you realize, you putz, if you did that in a game, what would happen? Like, if it goes foul, you understand. Well, but it didn't go foul. I go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That's like Robles stealing home with 2 outs and 2 strikes.
Exactly. To say he's 100%.
I'll have you know that was the only time Robles got thrown out on a stolen base attempt last year.
Oh, what? Really?
Crazy? Yeah. That's a crazy stat, isn't it?
Yeah. What did you make of Turner's? Is that what you thought Justin Turner was going to get in free agency?
What did he get, 4?
No, I didn't get more than that. I think he got like 6.
Yeah. I mean, he was asking for that much, so
yeah.
I thought so. I think that's
$6 million bucks.
I think that's one of the reasons why the Mariners didn't sign him, is because, like, you know, they weren't going to go that much.
Hey, how do you think Dan Wilson? A couple more things. Dan Wilson, year 2. How do you think it's 21-13 last year? Where do you think he gets even better at maybe in year 2? And now that he's got kind of actually really year 1 for him, now that he's got his feet wet.
Like, I don't know that he's going to run a game all that differently, like from a reliever standpoint and stuff like that. You know, it so much is like planned out pregame, like with numbers and data, and they have the numbers. He may gut feel it more, but like that's what people don't get is like Scott was a gut feel guy more than people thought. And I think the one thing with Dan is like maybe the playing time for starters or, you know, who's going good might stay. You know, he might be resistant to platoon every once in a while more, maybe. But like, you know, I think Dan and Scott both have the same philosophy, letting the players be themselves, trusting the players, and kind of going from that regard. So I don't know that there's going to be a significant difference. You know, I guess probably less meetings and that kind of stuff. You know, we're not seeing like they don't have the 3-point shooting contest and some of that stuff. Maybe it's a little more old school, but at the same time, you know, they're out there kind of doing some fun stuff too. I mean, like, but the other day I posted a video of Tony Arnrich throwing the exercise ball at catchers while they're trying.
Yeah, that was a great drill.
And like people are like sitting there talking like, oh, that's stupid. We did that in college, except for my coach threw a tackling dummy at me while I was doing it. And he didn't tell me the first time it was happening. I'm sitting there and they're hitting fungos from the outfield. I'm going to catch it, and all of a sudden something just whacks me upside the head, and I go down. And I look, and it's one of those shell tackling dummies.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great drill.
Because you know, there's stuff going on. It doesn't allow you to focus. And I mean, like and it's like, this is kind of boring down here, and there's a lot of down. You got to make it fun for these guys sometimes. Like, you know, like they're still kids at heart, and you're playing a game, so you got to make it competitive. Because I think another thing is, and that's one thing. I think the biggest thing with Dan is like, and I know Scott preached it, but Dan. I think Dan will be, there might be more consequences from getting away from it, is preaching the idea of team success over individual success. And so in situational hitting, if you're up there and it looks like you're just trying to hit a tank, and when all you're supposed to do is move the runner over by hitting a ground ball to the right side of the field, or, you know, you're up there and you have a poor plan or a poor attack, you know, with runner on third, less than 2 outs, and you punch out, I think you'll see repercussions. It might not happen right away, but you do that enough, like he may say, look, you know what, we're going to go with somebody else who's going to help us win the game more. And I think that's the one thing we've heard a lot of that from the players as well. Is just like, look, we missed it by one game, and we left a lot of games out on the field last year. So we need to do something different mentally to know that, like, it's not acceptable to fail and have a bad process and failure. And I mean, some of that may just be the maturity of this team when these guys getting older, but the recognition of it. And I think Dan, I mean, like even last year, you know, Dan wouldn't say anything about the incident with Randy Rosarena, and I can't remember when he got hit, staring guys down and all that stuff.
Right.
But I watched him go up to Randy and kind of just say, like, we don't do that. You're putting your teammates in a bad spot. There's better ways to handle that. You know?
The way that a lot of these availabilities with commissioners or executives are handled in this kind of setting at these kind of events is there's a moderator that kind of handles everything. You go up and say beforehand, hey, I'd like to get a question in if possible. I've been on the side when I was with the AP of kind of being the guy who sometimes would get the first question when sometimes these opportunities would be in Seattle and, the AP wouldn't have one of the national guys there. So it would go to the local guy and I would be the one to ask the first question. So I get that, we all kind of understand, like, AP is going to get a question. ESPN is going to get a question. Danny's Place, The Ringer is going to get a question. USA Today, like there's a process to how this works. So everyone understands how the game is played, but eventually you kind of get through those guys and then you want to get on to some other people. What irritated a lot of us, not just me, but there was others there who had very specific questions they had for Adam, was they cut it off after, I think it was 8 or 9 questions. And he had talked for about 30 minutes. He had kind of, in some ways, filibustered a couple of answers on some other topics. The Luka trade was one of the things.
Which I didn't understand that question, by the way. We can talk about that later. I didn't get it.
Yeah,
I don't understand why people think it's bad for the league.
I think the question could have been asked a little bit differently, but yeah. So there was the Luka trade, there was the Jimmy Butler trade. There's where are things with just the general state of the game. The ratings were down earlier in the year. How does the league view that in the context of so much digital now part of the footprint of sports and the NBA in particular? So get it. All those questions have to be, should be asked, frankly, but then not to get around to making sure that expansion is asked about when he has not been available in any way to the greater domestic media since September it was stunning at first. And then I think I personally got angry that they did not allow for enough questions to be asked to where that was brought up. And that's not the responsibility of anybody who did ask a question. They have their own reasons and their own topics that they wanted to touch on, but to not allow the opportunity for someone to ask about expansion in that setting was really, I think, short-sighted by the NBA, and it pissed a lot of people off, frankly.
Yeah. You and I, okay, so the fact is that, listen, national guys were asked it. I'm not sure why national guys didn't. I mean, I know there's a lot of pressing issues in the NBA. Why expansion wasn't brought up, I mean, that's, I guess everyone's got their own agenda in terms of what they wanted to ask there. And if you've got a limited amount of time, I get it. What is the latest buzz, though, with it? You and I have both read an article this morning from The Ringer from Howard Beck, who's covered the NBA for a very long time. I think if you read that article from Howard Beck, you come away thinking, oh, my God, like they may not expand at all. And if they do, it's going to be in like 2030 or 2035.
Yeah.
What is the holdup right now with the league not pressing forward with expansion? Because when he came out, I think it was a year ago or maybe less than a year ago, I mean, Tim, it felt like we were on the doorstep of it. Hey, the announcement's coming soon, and the process will start, and we're talking 2027. It feels like we're not even close to them coming back in 2027 now.
Yeah, so there's a couple of factors at play, which in theory they could get resolved fairly quickly and fairly soon. Whether that happens, though, is kind of the unknown. So the biggest issue right now is the sale of the Boston Celtics. And the reason that's the biggest issue is simply that whatever that number ends up being that the Celtics sell for, the expansion fee is likely to be in that neighborhood. So if the Celtics sell for $6 billion, which is just a baffling number to think of, there's a high likelihood the expansion fee is probably going to be around $5. If they sell for $5 billion, the expansion fee might be, lower, closer to $4. Now, the longer that the Celtics sale drags out, to me, that's a sign, and I think Howard Beck mentioned it in his story today, that's a sign they're not getting the number that they wanted for the sale, in which case they can't get the number that they want for expansion. So that's the first and probably the biggest tipping point in this whole process is, when will the Celtics sell? How much does it go for? The Celtics sale is a little unique in that they do not own the building. They don't own TD Garden. The Bruins owner actually owns TD Garden. So the Celtics are a tenant there. So their sale doesn't come baked in with the added benefit of having the arena as well. So the number can be a little skewed over what the final number could be, but most people think it's going to be in that 5 to 6 range that the Celtics sell for. Until that sells, there's going to be no move. There's going to be no movement. There just isn't. The league is not going to start an expansion process until it knows that one of its flagship entities has sold and exactly what that number is. The other piece of expansion that I think has delayed things a little bit is just the uncertainty in Vegas. I think who they want the owner to be. I think you don't know what the building situation necessarily is going to be.
Okay, who do they want? Is it LeBron and his group?
It's
Fenway?
LeBron, yes. It's Fenway and LeBron. That's the group that they want to have and be the owner in Vegas. The former owner of the Bucks, whose name is slipping my mind right now.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
He's kind of part of a group that's also kind of openly saying, hey, we want to be part of this process in Vegas. They seem to have an arena plan for a big ass project that's on the north end of the strip, right. Which would include a big hotel, a casino, all that. So there's that piece of it that's kind of getting in the way. There's the Oakview process, which, if Oakview's original plans for Vegas had come to fruition, then this probably wouldn't be an issue there right now because they'd be building at this point. Tell
people, because they hear Oakview, that's Tim Lewicki. They are trying to build another arena in Vegas.
Correct. The Oakview had plans a couple of years ago for a project that was going to be south of the Strip. It was going to be near where the high-speed train that they're constructing between LA and Vegas, where the terminal there, or their station there in Vegas, was going to drop off at. Big hotel casino project right along the freeway, but not on the Strip. And that just never kind of came to the plans got scuttled about a year ago. So Oakview has been looking at other possible properties in Vegas. It seems like from the reports from there that they've settled on a piece of land that's on the property of the Rio Hotel, which is just across the freeway from like where Caesar's Palace is. So it would be a little bit more adjacent to the Strip. But again, that still has not been finalized. There's been no agreement. There's been no shovels in the ground, nothing like that. And then the other wrinkle is that the owner of the Vegas Golden Knights, Bill Foley, came out in December and said, hey, we're good investing, $350 million in updating T-Mobile Arena to be fully ready for an NBA team. And the NBA already has a relationship there because that's where they've played the NBA Cup, the in-season tournament championship, semifinals, and final the last 2 years. We've seen it as a basketball venue plenty of times when the Pac-12 tournament was played there. It's a very nice basketball venue. It definitely would need some upgrades to get it to where I think the NBA would want it, long term. But right there, you don't have to build a new building. You just have to come to an agreement as a tenant there. So there's a lot of uncertainty in Vegas about how that is all going to play out, and I think that's also led to a little bit of a delay in the broader process starting when the league comes to look at expansion.
There's a question in our chat, and it's from Thomas Beeson, and I I'll just read. How many arenas does Vegas need? I mean,
You know what?
I'm with it. It's unbelievable. I mean, I get it that the owners want to own. They want to own the arena if they're going to own the team, because that's where you get maximum revenue. Rather than if you're the Fenway Group or any other ownership group that comes into T-Mobile, you're not going to get the maximum revenue out of it. But God Almighty, I mean, how many arenas can one place, sustain?
There is a saturation point, but there's also a supply and demand point, because when you have a situation like T-Mobile Arena, you have the nights, which is 45-ish dates a year for sure, and then we've seen with how good they've been, you have to block off May and June, for Stanley Cup playoff games.
Right.
You have UFC, you have concerts. It's become a destination for college basketball early season tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Big Ten tournament going there in a few years. There's been talk that maybe the Pac-12, if it gets its bleep together, could end up there. With
WCC is there.
The WCC is at the Orleans,
okay.
but there could be the chance of the Pac-12 getting back in there as it sort of rebuilds itself. So you kind of hit a point where, maybe you don't think you need a new arena there, but when you have to build in all these dates, you have 41 basketball games for sure every year, plus a couple preseason games, plus you have to block off space for postseason or for playoffs. You get to a point where it's not the most outlandish thing in the world to think that you might need another building in Vegas, as ridiculous as that seems for that market. It's not the craziest thing in the world. And to your point, it's about revenue. It's about how many different ways can you bring money in. And if you're the owner of the team and you're paying, $6 billion, $5 billion for the franchise, you're going to need to make that money back in some way. And maximizing your revenues from the building is the easiest way to do that.
Ed in our chat and brings up, we got great questions today. In fact, I'm just going to let them ask all the questions. Why doesn't the Fenway Group just have any interest in the Celtics? Do they?
They've not been one of the reported ones, and I think it's the LeBron influence. I think LeBron
wants to be in Vegas.
He wants to be in Vegas. This is not a secret. This is not something that he shied away from. This is not something that anyone has told me otherwise. He wants, he wants to be the owner of the team in Vegas. He already has a built-in partnership with Fenway that goes back many years at this point. In theory, it would make perfect sense for Fenway Sports Group to own the team in Boston. But I just doesn't sound like that's on their plate of what they want to consider. So far, the only known people who have bid or have submitted bids about the Celtics are one of their current minority owners has put together a group. I believe he's the largest minority owner. Again, his name is slipping my mind, but he's put together a group that was expected to submit a bid. Jeffrey Lurie has apparently, the owner of the Eagles, has apparently put together a group that has submitted a bid. And then there's always the rumor out that supposedly the Celtics got 4 bids in the first round. The rumor's always been out there that Bezos wants to own a team, and his opportunities with the NFL have not panned out so far. So there's been a thought that Bezos, could be a bidder on the Celtics this time around.
Has he been rumored with Seattle? I mean, it is called Climate Pledge.
Oddly enough, no. I have not heard Jeff's name attached to anything related to the potential team here. I think that's in part because it seems like the group here has pretty much everybody put into place. There's definitely going to be an Amazon influence, I think, to whatever that ownership group ends up looking like. Andy Jassy's already a minority owner of the Kraken. I would not be surprised if he was involved with the ownership of an NBA group. But here, they need
a bigger whale, don't they? Because it's Samantha Holloway, right? Has been the one that's going to be. She is David Bonnerman's daughter, David Bonnerman, who passed away a few months ago. She will be kind of the owner of it. She will be the owner of it. She'll be the principal owner. But she's not. I mean, I don't know what her net worth is, but it's not It's not NBA money. I mean, it's not ownership money. So they're going to need other people in it, or we get a Mariners thing where you've got 35 different owners.
So the NBA has rules now on your ownership, breakdown. It has limits on the number of people that you can have involved. So you don't have a basketball club of Seattle where you have 60 people making final votes on whether to sell the team to Clay Bennett. You have there's limitations now on how many people you can have in your investment group. There's also the private equity space now where you can have a private equity company, firm, holding, whatever, have up to 20% of your franchise in private equity. And there's a percentage stake that everybody has to be able to put in. So my understanding is the percentage stake's around 1%. So if the sale price is $5 billion and you want to be part of the Seattle Supersonics ownership group, you have to be able to put in 1%, which is $50 million. And that's to have 1%. 1%. You can claim you're an owner.
I'm out. I'm out. I was gonna throw my name in there, but I'm out.
Yeah, you can claim that you're an owner, but it's going to cost you $50 million of investment. So you're right. At the end of the day, you got to have a whale. You got to have someone with some big money that's able to come in and be able to say, hey, I can put down 40% of the total. I can put down 50% of the total. Whatever that final number is, you're going to have to need someone who's got $2 to $3 billion available to do this.
Teams, I don't think, ever really got away from the importance of running the football. The conversation's been more about how do we acquire the running back that's going to lead our backfield. Can we use a first round pick on that guy? Can we give him some big money in free agency? That's where I think the conversation has shifted over the last 10 years, and then maybe it's overcorrected itself, to the point where, even look 2 years ago, Bijan Robinson going top 10, Jahmyr Gibbs going top 12. I don't think either of those teams, the Falcons or the Lions, have any regrets about the picks that they made at those spots. You look at Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, it was Saquon Barkley in free agency this year. None of those teams have any regrets about the contracts they gave out to those players. And so this year, with the running, it'll be interesting with this running back class. We're going to have at least one in the first round with Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. And then how many more do we get in that first round? 2 is possible. 3 is possible. Big fan of Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Marion Hampton, North Carolina, the Ohio State kids, Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins right behind them. I'm a big fan of Jordan James from Oregon. I think one of the reasons maybe you don't go running back in the top 40 picks is because of the depth. You feel like, okay, let's wait until round 2, round 3 and get a Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, an RJ Harvey from UCF, a Devin Neal from Kansas, and then on and on. I mean, there's going to be a lot of, I went through it and I had draftable grades on over 30 running backs in this draft. Probably not going to see that many guys drafted. So even late in this draft, you feel pretty optimistic about some of the running back talent that you could get. And so it'll be interesting as we go through this draft, how many actually go in the first round, and then do we see a run on day 2? How do these running backs come off the board?
How high do you think that Ashton Jeanty will go?
It's tough when you do a mock draft because, and we went through this 2 years ago with the Bijan draft, when you did a mock and you're trying to figure out where he's going to go, it was hard to find a landing spot. If the Falcons don't take Bijan Robinson at 8, you could say maybe the Lions would have taken him at 12, but they really like Jahmyr Gibbs. So I don't, it's tough. This year's draft, I think it's possible he goes top 10. It's at least something that teams will consider. You look at a team like the Raiders. They need help in so many different spots. They're picking at number 6. We have a brand new GM, brand new head coach. There's a lot of newness to this Raiders team, which makes it tough to really understand where they might want to go. They have a lot of needs on that team, but running back was a pretty big need, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. But if you bring in a guy like Ashton Jeanty, maybe he stabilizes things for that offense. And so no matter who you put at quarterback, he's going to help the offense as a whole. And so at number 6, it becomes intriguing. After that, I mean, Dallas is the most, the connector, the pairing that we see the most with Ashton Jeanty. If he gets past 12, then I think it becomes interesting. Do we see Denver maybe make a move? You feel like you drop him into that offense with Sean Payton and Bo Nix and, what he could do as part of that offense and how that would ascend that offense even more. Washington, could we see them make a move up to go get an Ashton Jeanty? You drop him in that offense, and him and Jane Daniels on the same backfield is kind of scary. So there's a lot of interesting landing spots, and he could really go 6. He'd go 18, and I don't think either one of those spots would be too surprising.
Yeah, right. When I asked you that question, I was thinking of the Raiders at 6, just because of Pete Carroll, and I'm just curious how much say Pete Carroll will have in the draft. We know he loves to run the football. He loves running backs. Not the decision maker anymore, but will obviously have a voice in the room. But
Yes.
His role is different than it was in Seattle when he was the president of football operations.
No doubt. And he didn't take this job to just kind of sit by and, not have a voice. So he'll definitely have a say in what the Raiders do. The conversation we're having now is before the combine, before free agency. The next few weeks will certainly shape how we feel teams will look at the draft. If the Raiders go out and make a splash at running back, obviously that changes things with how we look at they might attack the draft. But if they don't make any big moves in free agency at the running back position, then all of a sudden, okay, Ashton Jeanty becomes much more of a possibility there of a guy that, and there's no such thing as a safe pick in the NFL draft. It's shouldn't be in the vocabulary whenever you talk about draft. But with Ashton Jeanty, you feel really good about the person you're getting and then just the all-around talent, not just as a rusher, but catching the football. He's a promising blocker. So there's a lot with Ashton Jeanty that is easy to sell to the room, to an owner, and to a fan base.
Dane, most Seahawks fans would say, hey, listen, the biggest need for this football team is on the offensive line, and it's on the interior portion of this offensive line. They're sitting there right now at 18. Seahawks fans, they're on the ledge. They need help on the offensive line. They're coming to you for answers, Dane. Are there answers at 18 if they decide to go that route on the interior offensive line?
I think so. Tyler Booker is the one that stands out the most, Alabama guard. This guy he's had a pro mindset since he was about in 6th grade, maybe before that. I mean, every decision he has made has been to get to this point. He grew up in Connecticut, but for high school, he, went over 90 minutes away to go to a better football program in New Jersey. Then he went to IMG Academy because he wanted to be tested. He committed to Alabama because he wanted to play against the best. He wanted to be developed. So, and I think that watching over the summer, watching a sophomore tape, a little bit underwhelmed. You throw on that Rose Bowl tape against Michigan, and he was falling off balance. It wasn't consistent. This year, he took a big step in his development. You want when you scout guards, you want guys that can anchor at shallow depth so they can protect the integrity, the depth of the pocket, and he does that really well. In the run game, you want a guard that can move guys, physically move them with power, with leverage. He does that too. And so with Tyler Booker, I think that, we're speaking the Seahawks language with this pick. If he's not there, Kelvin Banks would be maybe the plan B, in my opinion. Left tackle at Texas, who I never understood the top 10 hype with him. He's a good player, but on the ground too much. Some of the balance issues show up. But he's a smart, really, his foot quickness is really good. I think he's going to be somewhere in that top 25, and I like him moving inside at guard at the next level. I think that'll help mask some of those issues.
Hey, we always have this discussion and I hear fans and say, a tackle's a tackle, but there's a difference between playing left tackle and right tackle, and I think most people understand that. For guards, how do NFL evaluators look at that? Is it interchangeable left, right?
It's something where, honestly, scouts rely on the offensive line coach. If you're a scout, you go to a program and talk to the offensive line coach and say, hey, has he done it? Has he trained at this at the other opposite guard spot, or has he been only this way? What about going back to high school? Does he have any experience to it? And then you talk to who he's been working out with during the pre-draft process. Which offensive line trainer is he working out with? Has he worked on snapping the football? Does he have center versatility? And then that's when you get your offensive line coach with your team involved, and he goes and works out the player, and so he can see the mannerisms, the stance, the quickness, and he you can tell where he's more accustomed to, but then does he move just as well on the other side? So it's something where there's it's a fact-finding mission, but then also getting your offensive line coach involved to really get his eyes on the player, give his stamp of approval. So definitely a lot of steps to being comfortable that he has the true versatility if you can't look at the tape and you don't have the proof of concept right there in front of you.
Seems like there's always a turning point in the draft, right? Everyone says it every year. Well, this is the moment where the draft goes one way. For you, as you look at it, and we're months away from it actually taking place. Is there a spot where you think this draft turns? Looking at it right now.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of talk about it, because what happens at 1? Like with the Titans, yeah, they could use a quarterback, but there's a lot of uncertainty with them. You have a brand new GM, you have a second-year head coach. Do they feel compelled to take one of these quarterbacks? Do you love one of these quarterbacks? Or are they looking to get out of there and trade back? The Giants are looking at these quarterbacks. They have to. They're backed into a corner. And so the Giants move up from 3 to 1. It's still early, but that feels like the most likely thing that'll play out here, especially because it won't take – I don't think the Giants would have to give up a future 1 to move up 2 spots. It's not that type of draft. The Titans will be fine moving back with, say, day 2 picks, something like that. So what do the Titans do at 1? And then, once we get to the back half of top 10, this is going to be a draft where I think we're going to see a lot of surprises. And it's bad for mock drafts, but it's great for just the fun of the draft. And I'm here for that. Yeah. I'd be okay going 0 for 32 in my mock if that means it was a fun, unpredictable draft. And honestly, I think that's what we're going to get this year, because teams and the way they look at these players after we get past the top 5, it's kind of all over the place. And so we'll learn more next week in Indianapolis, and then after free agency and in March, when we have a lot of the workouts and we understand some of the buzz and we kind of get a better understanding how these teams look at players. But I think it's going to be an unpredictable draft, and that's going to make for a lot of fun.
It's not obvious.